Let's open up our Bibles. Jeremiah 25:33. And those slain by Jehovah will certainly come to be in that day from one end of the earth clear to the other end of the earth. They will not be bewailed, neither will they be gathered up or be buried. As manure on the surface of the ground, they will become. Now, try to picture this, friends, this gruesome picture. Dead bodies and body parts of the wicked will lie strewn on the surface of the ground, in streets, alleyways, fields, and buildings. Now, notice that God in this verse tells us here that no one will mourn or bury these dead ones. Now, what does this tell us? It shows us that we will not be traumatized by his mass annihilation of these individuals. No, his divine execution of the wicked will not haunt us for the rest of our lives. Rather, we will react to it today as we do when a vicious serial murderer is executed. How do you feel about him when he gets it? Why, we will feel an inner satisfaction. Our indignation has been appeased. Yes, a sense of triumph that at last Jehovah's justice has been served. AIDS has been stopped. The gays are gone. The homosexuals, the lesbians, the murderers, the drug lords, all gone. Now, you're going to feel sorry for these people? No. And those that don't mind them living around, you're going to feel sorry for individuals? No. Now, how will Jehovah dispose of all these bodies of those slain by him? Ezekiel 39 and Revelation 19, you can look this up when you get home, we haven't got the time, tells us that he will beckon his wild beasts and birds to come and devour their fleshy parts. However, the vast number of cadavers will be much more than they can consume. Therefore, Jehovah will doubtless use some highly scientific means at his disposal, perhaps antimatter, to disintegrate their putrefying organisms. Now, especially in cities where we live, there's going to be a high concentration of dead ones. We're going to have to need them because those animals in the Bronx Zoo, they got out. They're still going to eat all the bodies in the Bronx. No, but Jehovah demonstrates his practical wisdom by doing this. He prevents disease from spreading to us from their putrefying flesh of all these dead ones. He rids their earth of their foul smell, and believe me, friends, we need to get that cleared up. And he will keep our air and water free from pollution. So he knows what he's doing. He's running the show. He'll take care of it. Thus, wherever we are, our God will thoroughly, according to Ezekiel 39, cleanse the land.
And they even laugh along about the dead bodies, putrefying flesh, and about the dead bodies being too much for animals to consume. They liken gays and lesbians to murderers and the people who accept those lifestyles as well. So, but this is representative of their ideas and the stuff I grew up with. So this talk was given by a representative of the Watchtower Society, or Jehovah's Witnesses, as you may know them. Now, when I looked for this video, I've seen it a few times, when I looked for it on YouTube, I had to verify I was 18 to view it. Now, one thing to bear in mind is there are children in these talks. They don't separate them out, so children are listening to this. I listen to these things. Now, also, on top of these things, there are the graphic images from their publications. This one here, which you just saw, this is from a children's book about Jesus. The other one is from their Revelation book. Here you see earthquakes, people dying on the floor, fireballs coming from the sky. This is Babylon the Great, harlot, drunken harlot on a many-headed beast. These are happy Jehovah's Witnesses walking away from the destruction of the earth. Here, again, from the Revelation book, you've got a firing squad here. You've got people being burnt at the stake. You've got people being eaten by lions. You've got people having their heads chopped off. Again, this is the world being destroyed. This is a more recent picture on one of their magazines, Awake or Watchtower, I'm not sure which one. Again, a continuing theme of destruction. Here we go. Another one. Here she is in the car, trying to get away from fireballs in the sky. So that's basically the backdrop of my childhood. That's from a very young age. You will see all these pictures. I saw all those pictures growing up. And these are the pictures, these are the things that featured in my nightmares for 15 years after I left. I feared imminent death daily after I left, and I'm not alone. Daily I talk to people who are still having nightmares, who have anxiety, who have depression, who have PTSD from the things they're doing. Tonight I'm going to take you through my personal experience in and out of the organisation. I'll tell you about what it's done to me, and I'm going to talk to you about 3 really harmful doctrines or policies they now have. And some of them are so bad that people are dying from them. And hopefully I can show you how we can change it and how we can make things better. Okay, so my story is not unusual and it's not the worst by a long way. But just by speaking here publicly, I'll be known as an apostate. Now, for you, probably an apostate doesn't have the loaded language that they have. This is what they said about apostates in 2011. Apostates are mentally diseased and they seek to infect others with their disloyal teachings. So that's what my family think of me. If my family did still talk to me, this would be enough. Me standing here now would be enough for them to stop talking to me and to shun me. And that's why people don't talk about it. Because even when they leave, they fear losing their family. A lot of even very prominent activists online will still have anonymous accounts because they don't want their family finding out. Also, I've been conditioned, even though I left 20 years ago, I've been conditioned not to talk about this because this is the worst thing I can do. So I have lots of nerves, so forgive me. Okay. So, growing up as Jehovah's Witness. I'm a 2nd generation Jehovah's Witness, and it's all I knew from birth till 20 years ago. My mum was converted in a very usual way. She was at a low point in her life. She was isolated. She just moved from London to Milton Keynes. She got married at 16, and she had, I think she had probably 2 children by that point, so she was all on her own. She did have a religion of sorts, but not a really strong faith. So my mum was right, basically. I know she had friends growing up, but I never ever knew her to have friends in Milton Keynes. So I don't know what got her interested, but I think having company was probably an element of it. So this is what happens. They call it your door. They come back. She started studying with them. This will be one of their publications. The way they're set out, you have a paragraph, you might have a scripture, and then you answer the question. Basically, they will spoon feed their doctrine to you, and there's no room for disagreement with what they tell you is true, basically. When you're inside it, you can't see it. You can't see the persuasion and the loaded language. But years later now, looking at it, I can see it very, very clearly. So then, once you've been studying for a while, you go to one of the meetings. They used to have 3 meetings a week. They'd have 2 hours on Tuesday, 2 on a Thursday, no, 1 on Thursday and 2 on a Sunday. You'd probably start going to the shorter meeting. But you probably would not start with something like the Revelation book, where those pictures are from, because that's not for the uninitiated. I didn't have any choice. I was a child, so I had to see those things. And they've got the book of Revelation completely sorted out. If you've ever read the book of Revelation, you know what a feat that is. And they twist prophecies to fit their own agenda. After you'd be going there for a while, they would then, you'd go to their main meeting, which would be held at a place called a Kingdom Hall, which you might have seen around. That's what they call their church, basically. And there's something that goes on that's called love bombing. I don't know whether you've heard of that before. You meet all these amazingly nice, friendly people, and these people are genuinely nice people. The organisation is not a nice organisation. So you can imagine from someone being totally isolated and knowing nobody, suddenly she has a full community around her. So you can see why that would be seductive to someone who's all on their own. In time, she was baptised, which is when you formally identify as a Jehovah's Witness. This is indicated by full body immersion. They're very proud of the fact that they don't do christening. They don't. They want people to know what they're doing before they dedicate themselves, which is noble until you hear of stories of 8- and 6-year-olds being baptised. And considering the ramifications that I'll go into later, we'll see why that is a huge problem. So all 6 of us children were brought up as Jehovah's Witnesses. So, and my dad was there, but he wasn't present, let's say. So I can imagine how stressful it would have been for her dragging us all to these meetings 3 times a week. So, net bad or good for her at that point, I don't know. Maybe it was good because she had the company. So that's how my mum became Jehovah's Witness, and this was years before I was born. So I just want to run through a lot of things that Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to do. You probably know most of them. So, Christmas, birthdays, Easter, Harvest Festival, Valentine's Day, Halloween, Guy Fawkes, Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, Father's Day. They can't vote, they can't have blood transfusion, they cannot give blood, they cannot date as a youth in or out of the organisation, they can't go to normal parties, they can't really go on to further education, entertainment is restricted, reading material is restricted, no sex before marriage, no smoking, no tattoos, they cannot attend school religious assemblies, they cannot gamble, they cannot salute the flag, and they cannot sing the national anthem. There's probably more, but I can't think of them right now. So those are tough restrictions for an adult, but they're incredibly isolating for a child who's surrounded by people doing these things at school. And you know, they don't celebrate Christmas. That's one of the things that most people know. But that didn't happen until 1928. Up until that time, they did celebrate Christmas. And then somebody decided that it was pagan, it was the wrong date, and then that was it. There was talk in December in 1928 to tell them they couldn't do it anymore. So that must have been a good Christmas for everybody. Cancelled. And then shortly after that, they kind of outlawed birthdays, and things like Mother's Day also. But even when I was Jehovah's Witness, I didn't really know the logical reason for these. Mother's Day is something to do with creature worship, so I don't know, I'm lost at that point. So I grew up not celebrating my own birthday, and to this day I don't really know. I'm one of 6. I don't know anyone's birthday apart from my little sister, and that's because it's Valentine's Day and it's an obvious day. Honestly, I didn't feel like I was missing out at all, because it's all I'd ever known. But I talked to my brother, and he did resent it. He felt like he should be partaking in these things. But I did hate Christmas time. At school, I did feel left out when everyone was getting cards. So I hated not getting a card, but then I hated getting a card also, because I would then put it in my bag and I'd have to take it home or throw it away. And my mum wouldn't have punished me for it, but I felt guilty. I felt guilty that I'd done something wrong. But I was so convinced, brainwashed, that these things were bad and pagan, that it was short-lived. So, and also around Christmas, people will come round selling raffle tickets. This is considered gambling, by the way. And one year, I don't know whether the teacher felt bad for me or felt bad for the whole class. I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but I got a raffle ticket. This was bad news for me. I was like, I shouldn't have this. I was like, okay, you know, put it away. But my raffle ticket won. Now, the raffle ticket was pulled in an assembly. I was sitting outside of this assembly because it was religious. So I had a raffle ticket. I won the raffle. I was pulled into a religious assembly. And what do you think I won? I won a great big assortment of chocolate bars in a big Christmas stocking. So this was bad times for me. And again, I would have got punished for it, but I felt bad. I felt bad that I had let my mum down. I let God down also. So that was not a great time for me. So I didn't feel bad as a child. I feel bad for the child I was. I feel bad that I never experienced all those things. I've now experienced 20 Christmases. And at first, I had no idea what I was doing. I don't have any childhood memories of Christmas. I don't get any feelings when decorations go up. I don't get any nostalgic feelings from Christmas food. None of that thing. And when I was first not a Jehovah's Witness, I would be invited to various friends' houses, but I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how Christmas was done, essentially. But 5 years ago, I spent my first Christmas with Leo, also my son. And so now it's about them, but I still feel out of place, and maybe that will change in time. I hope so. So this was normal life for me. Meetings, knocking on doors, which you're dragged around from a child. Around the age of 10, I joined what they call the ministry school, theocratic ministry school, sorry. And this is held in the Kingdom Hall, and this is where they essentially teach you how to go around the doors. If you want to be a publisher, which is to be qualified, I guess, you have to do this. There's no opt-out. You cannot get baptized, which is the end game, I guess, without taking this step first. So they would give you get assigned a subject and some scriptures. You'd have to build a 5-minute talk around this. If you were a man, brother, a boy of a certain age, I'm not sure when it started, you could address the congregation directly. If you're a woman, you can't do that. So, but did we get out? We did not get out of it. We had to sit, it would be me and another sister or another woman, and we'd have to do like a play thing. It's very bizarre. And they would give you certain things to work on, so gesturing, pausing, use of notes. See, I failed here. And then you give your talk, you go and sit down, and they would grade you in front of the whole congregation, which is hard enough as an adult. As a child, they may have gone easy on you if you're a child, but that's really hard to take. Put me off public speaking for life. Here I am. And so the other part of being a publisher was, let me show you. Here we go. You'll remember this. This is basically, these are all your subject things you have to work on, and you'll get a G for good, is it, I think, and then W for work on. This person was awesome, by the way. Clearly this person needed no help. And so the next part of this would be going out in field service, so knocking on doors. And for that, you are required to fill in, am I bringing back the memories here? Yeah. You'd have to, every month, name, month, all the things you've placed, how many hours you've done, how many return visits, magazines. And I remember this being a huge cause of stress for my mum, because she never ever felt she'd done enough. She had 6 children and she never felt she'd done enough, and I'm sure that is common with so many people. And if you fail to report for, I'm not sure, I think it's 3 months or something, you will be approached by the elders to see why that is, because after a certain amount of time you are classed as inactive. So again, there's no opt-out for this. So on top of these things, oh, this is interesting. These are the records they used to keep. This is probably computerized now. See? Basically, street, territory number, these are the symbols they put down. Call again, not home, which everything always was. Busy, child, man or woman. I'm not sure why that's relevant, but anyway, that's what they used to write it all down on. So on top of this, on top of all these other things, you had to study for the meetings as well. As I said before, this is based around only their publication. You would read the paragraph and answer the question, read from their Bible. It's only their Bible, which is different to everybody else's. It's only their publications. These days, only their website. And now they have broadcasting, so that's nice also. They don't ban TV as such. They will tell you what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. As I said, when I look back now at those publications, it's jarring how suggestive their language is, and how flawed their reasoning is also. But when you're in it for a long time, you don't even see it. And you just have to accept that their truth is the truth. And that's what they call it. That's what they actually call their religion. They call it the truth. You're in the truth. And when you leave the truth. And years and years of that kind of language just works it into your psyche. It's difficult for me not to call it that now. So they keep you really busy. They discourage, for children, they discourage any extracurricular activities. Anything that means associating with worldly people. As you guys. And me now, I guess. I'm really bad, so they can't associate with me at all. Yeah. Any more than they need to. So, in their recent convention, they told the story of a boy called Sergei. It was a fictional account. He was a really good violin player, but he wasn't allowed to join an orchestra. He wasn't allowed to even join the school orchestra. And this was held up as a great example for children. This is what you should be doing. You shouldn't be doing anything outside. It went on, it got worse as it got on anyway. So that's great. But then you've got high profile Jehovah's Witnesses. You've got, not anymore, but you've got Prince and you've got the Williams sisters, who you can see are pursuing money, they're pursuing their career, sports, but the general rank and file aren't allowed to do that. They're not even allowed to go to university. So you can see that's a huge kick in the teeth for normal people, for the normal children. So this went on. And at the age of 16, there was an unspoken pressure to become baptized. Now, most Jehovah's Witnesses get married at 18. You can't do that in the Kingdom Hall unless you've been baptized. So once I left school, I did that. I became an auxiliary pioneer, which means I committed to 60 hours a month, knocking on doors. My older sister was a regular pioneer, and she committed to 90 hours a month, knocking on doors. This is basically the pinnacle of spirituality for a woman in the congregation, because she can't have any position of authority at all. And around this, these people also have to support themselves. They have to work also, which means men end up being window cleaners, women end up being cleaners. I was a cleaner, which keeps them really poor all the time. But this again is held up as the best thing you can do. You're encouraged to leave school as soon as you can, to invest everything you have in the organisation, because Armageddon is just around the corner. It's been around the corner for 100 years now. Their first prophecy was 1914, which is great because loads of bad stuff happened in 1914. But this date was actually calculated years before from measurements in the pyramids. A lot of witnesses don't know that. And then the guy who prophesied this was buried under a pyramid, and they don't want to hear that. But yeah. So there was 1914, 1918, 1925 or 28, 1975, and now it's just soon. So be careful. And when these dates used to come up, they would encourage people to sell their possessions, sell their cars, houses, not have children. So you can see that impacted their lives. And now, as I said, it's just soon. And when their prophecies don't come true, they cite something called new light, which basically means they are changing their mind. New light refers to their plan being gradually revealed to them by God. So he's not wrong, he's just, drip feeding it in really wrong ways. But again, when you're in it, you don't notice it. It changes so gradually you don't see it. So, I was baptised, knocking on doors, doing what I was meant to do, and I wish I could tell you I had some grand realisation that the prophecies weren't true, but I did not. I felt increasingly isolated in the congregation, even though I was towing the line. So around this time I met a worldly man, who then I married later on. He showed me attention I'd never been shown in the congregation. He liked me for me, not what I was doing, not how spiritual I was. And how many hours I dedicated knocking on doors. But you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to get into relationships with worldly people. So I began a very short double life. I lied to my mum about where I was going. And as things happen in normal people's lives, I had sex with this man. I was very quickly discovered. I was asked about it, and I was honest. I received letters from family members and friends asking me to repent, but I didn't. There was a judicial hearing, which is 3 elders. You go and meet with them. You beg to be allowed to stay, or say that you repent and you're sorry. I didn't go. I told them I knew I disobeyed the rules and I wasn't sorry. So I was disfellowshipped, which is basically like excommunication from a church. This meant that no one in the congregation could talk to me anymore. My childhood friends couldn't talk to me anymore, and this is known as shunning. As with many of the rules, the doctrine and strictness has fluctuated. At that point, it didn't include immediate family, and I made peace with that. I was like, okay, well, I can deal with that. I can deal without these people as long as I have my family. My mum didn't attend the meeting. The announcements were made out, and neither did I. Now, I never remember my mum ever not attending a meeting, so this was a big thing. But I know what happens. What happens is they say, we've got an announcement. It goes very quiet. An elder will go to the platform and say, so-and-so has been disfellowshipped, and they'll leave the platform. No explanation, no more information at all about it. And I know if I'd been there from that moment, no one would talk to me. And I know my mum would. It was shameful for her to have a child who'd done that, and she probably didn't want to deal with the awkwardness after. So due to the atmosphere at home, I moved out and in with my boyfriend. We met with my mum, and she basically indicated that me being unmarried was the real issue. So we were married. None of my Jehovah's Witness family came to the wedding. Previously, my sister also married an unbeliever, but she was more dishonest about it. So she wasn't disfellowshipped, but we couldn't go to her wedding either because we couldn't be seen to be approving of what she was doing. The day after I came back from my wedding, I called my mum to tell her, and she basically told me she couldn't associate with me anymore. I don't remember the actual words, but that was the gist. My sister, my little sister, there are many, visited me a couple of times, but it was really, really strained. And when she got married at the ripe old age of 18, I wasn't invited to the wedding reception. It was a public service, so I went there, but I sat at the back with one of my brothers. I wasn't in the photos, and I left straight afterwards. No one talked to me on that occasion either. After this conversation with my mother, I became very unwell with depression, to the point where I couldn't work anymore. And the low point came when I began self-harming. That was short-lived, thankfully, but the man I married couldn't understand what was going on. Who could understand what was going on? And so he sent me to stay with my sister for a short time. At one time in the future, I was desperate and I needed somewhere to stay. My mum did let me stay, but she was quickly told or advised that it wasn't appropriate. So I had to move on into with one of my brothers. I just move around basically. So that's my story. What I'm going to do now is go on to the policies that are particularly, if that's not right, that are particularly harmful. The first one is shunning, which I have personal experience with. So, I'm currently and have been shunned for 20 years by the whole Jehovah's Witness community. With childhood friends, Jehovah's Witnesses I've never met, people online block me straight away, and immediate family. So this is a complete cutting off of a former believer. It happens immediately after you've disfellowshipped. If you're there, I don't know why you'd be there to hear this announcement, but if you are, no one will speak to you after that time. So ever since I've been disfellowshipped, I've been shunned. I've never been talked to by a member of my former congregation. It's been gradual, but now I'm shunned by my whole Jehovah's Witness family. My mum's never seen my children. She lives 10 minutes away from me, and she's never seen them. I've passed my brother-in-law in the street, and he's looked the other way. So it's fairly full on. I mean, to these people, you are dead, essentially, to these people. And the only way back is reinstatement. Reinstatement includes repenting, obviously, first. And then there's an arbitrary time of attending meetings while being shunned the whole time. In my day, that was 3 months. Now, you can imagine how that would feel to go to this place and see all these people you've grown up with and be shunned by them. So, first I found this really painful, and I ran away to London, basically. I used to feel bad for people having to shun me. That's how conditioned I was. I felt bad for them. So, but this is a normal experience. Most ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, especially disfellowship ones, experience this. But their policy wasn't always like this. Again, it's changed over time. This is what they said in 1947. The practice of excommunication as an unscriptural pagan practice, to show it should be left to God to judge individuals. So that's quite different to what I'm experiencing. Okay, 1952. Now we have a scriptural arrangement when they've just said that it's not scriptural. Disfellowshipping wrongdoers was instituted. There we go. God's organisation would not tolerate persons who refused to keep unspotted, clean and pure in the sight of Jehovah. A few years later, 1955, if after sufficient warning the publisher persists in associating with a disfellowshipped person, instead of aligning himself with Jehovah's organisation, he should also be disfellowshipped. So we've moved, in just a few years, we've moved a long way. And then in 1970, yet there might be some absolutely necessary family matters requiring communication, such as legalities over a will or property. But the disfellowshipped relative should be made to appreciate that his status has changed, that he is no longer welcome in the home, nor is he a preferred companion. So in not many years, they've completely changed their mind about what it should be. I would say at their most recent convention, they had a video about somebody's daughter. The daughter was living at home. She got disfellowshipped. In time, she moved out of the home. And it shows her getting very upset and very depressed. And the parents have no contact with her. They show her trying to call, and the parents not picking up the phone. And so they won't even pick up the phone to her. And then it shows the video spanned 15 years, and it showed that the parents had not talked to her, picked up the phone in 15 years. They don't talk to her again until she is reinstated. So, and this was clapped. This was after the talk. The brother said, "Isn't that great? They didn't even pick up the phone to see if she was okay." And this is seen as a positive to these people.
When a dear friend or perhaps even a family member leaves the truth, it can be a very challenging situation. It can truly be a test of our faith when we see something like that take place. While watching this dramatization, pay attention to how the mother was able to champion the truth by remaining loyal to Jehovah.
My name is Gabriella. Ben and I have always enjoyed attending the meetings, but lately it's been difficult. Something was missing. Our son. It was like watching a movie of someone else's family. I couldn't believe this was happening to us. Our son Levi was no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. The elders and friends in the congregation were so supportive and understanding. Many of them watched Levi grow up, give his first talk, get baptized. I was so torn. I was disappointed in Levi for leaving Jehovah, but I was more disappointed in myself. I felt like we failed him somehow. I kept wondering how he was doing. Was he okay? Then, as hard as the past few weeks had been, it just got harder. I knew what the Bible said about quit mixing in company with anyone who is not living according to Christian standards, but I never thought that scripture would one day apply to me. Later that evening, a brother was talking about the example of Korah's sons. Jehovah confirmed that he was using Moses to lead his people, not Korah. When the people were told to move away from the rebels' tents, what would Korah's sons do? Would they put loyalty to family ahead of loyalty to Jehovah? The Bible tells us that his sons remained loyal to Jehovah and were blessed for it. That night, after the meeting, I told Ben about the text I received from Levi. I told him everything. How I miss Levi so much, but that I also wanted to be loyal to Jehovah, like Korah's sons. Ben admitted that he too had been struggling with feelings like mine. But then, he said something that I hadn't thought of. If we were to stand between Levi and the discipline he needs, we would in effect be blocking an expression of Jehovah's love from reaching him. In fact, it's our very loyalty to Jehovah that could save his life. We agreed to continue to put our trust in Jehovah and stay loyal to him.
They span through 5 years. There's no resolution at the end of this video, by the way. They just don't talk for 5 years. And that's it. So this is their most recent one. If there was any doubt at all about that. So, recently you might know that Jehovah's Witnesses are being investigated for child abuse. I'll go into that next. But this is what their finding was from the Royal Commission specifically about shunning. They said, 1, it makes it extremely difficult for someone to leave the organisation. It's cruel on those who leave and on their friends and family who remain behind. It's particularly cruel on those who have suffered child sexual abuse in the organisation and who wish to leave because they feel their complaints about it have not been adequately dealt with. It's not apparently justified by the scriptures that they cited to support it. It's adopted and enforced in order to prevent people from leaving the organisation and thereby to maintain its membership. And it is in conflict with the organisation's professed support for freedom of religious choice and the belief that Jehovah God is a compassionate God who recognises the worth and dignity of all human beings. So, that's the shunning issue. And there was some suggestion that it might be rolled out to inactive ones also. That's not been rolled out in the organisation, but it would surprise me if that's the next thing. So, another depressing subject coming up. Okay, Jehovah's Witnesses, child abuse and the Royal Commission. So, I'll just jump straight in. Okay, in 2012 in the US, Candice Conti was the first person to successfully bring legal action against the Watchtower Society for the mishandling of child abuse. Initially, she was awarded $28 million, but this was stripped down to $2.8 million in the end. The court found the Watchtower Society responsible for not supervising someone they knew to be a paedophile, allowing him to go door to door with a child who was 9 or 10 years old, and such a lack of supervision that he was able to take her back to his house on many occasions. In 2014, Jose Lopez, also in the US, was awarded $13.5 million in damages after he too was abused by a member of the congregation. The abuse happened in 1986 when he was just 7 years old. The elders in his congregation knew about former abuses as early as 1982. He'd abused 4 other children. So, is there a specific issue that makes it a problem within the witnesses? Yes, spoiler alert, there is. It's two witness rule. These are the scriptures they used to defend it. This was talking about any allegation of crime, as you see in due to a long time ago. Anyway, and basically they can only take an allegation if there's 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, they're applying this to child abuse, and they defended this in the investigation. I don't have to tell you what a stupid rule this is. They then changed their mind and said that they would take two victims. If there's two victims of the same person, they will take that testimony. But obviously, this means this person here, this child here, just has to wait it out until he does it again. That is literally waiting for a paedophile to do it again. And who knows, that person might not talk about it. So, and also part of the issue here is their belief. This was from the Watchtower in 1995. What if the one accused, though, denying the wrongdoing is really guilty? Basically, if you've got a child with an allegation and they ask the person, and the person says, no, I didn't do it, that's it. That is the end of the investigation. They put it in a record, put it in their safe. Does he get away with it, as it were? Certainly not. The question of his guilt or innocence can be safely left in Jehovah's hands. So they believe so much that they will just leave it. And that's what they've been doing, basically. So, in the summer of 2015, Jehovah's Witness organisation was investigated for their handling of child abuse. This is what they found. This is just in Australia, by the way. This is the number of allegations. This was like reports. So this is stuff they've got on file. Between 1950 and 2015, there was 1,066 allegations in Australia. So when you're thinking about this number, that means these are just the ones that have had two witnesses to it, or somebody's admitted to doing it. This is not including random children that have come to them and they've not listened to. So how many of these do you think they reported to the police? 0. Not a single one. Now, it is law in Australia to report it, and they didn't. So, I'm just going to read you one of the stories that came up in the investigation. BCG, this was to protect her identity. She was 17 when she suffered repeated abuse by her father, who was an elder, while the rest of the family were away over a 2-week period. She approached 2 elders in the congregation, but they refused to talk to her until she had either approached her father about the abuse, or unless her father was present at the meeting. A meeting was finally arranged 8 months later at the insistence of her boyfriend. Around this time, her father was being investigated for an extramarital affair, which is obviously more of an issue for them. She was interviewed, or as she said in the hearing, interrogated, several times at committee meeting consisting of an all-male panel. During one of these meetings, her father was present and threatened her verbally and physically. It then came to light that her 3 sisters were also abused by her father, one of those being as young as 2 or 3 of age when the abuse started. Now this is where we can refer back to the woeful 2-witness rule or 2-victim rule. Under this, they had enough testimonies to investigate the matter, but they refused. They said that the sisters' testimony wasn't valid because they were too young to know what they were saying. And said that they were not witnesses to the same event, so it wasn't permissible. When asked about this, they said that they didn't remember being told about the extra evidence until handwritten notes were presented to them in court. Elders said they did believe BCG was a genuine case, but felt powerless due to the lack of evidence. Her father even confessed to the abuse, but they still didn't disfellowship him, let alone tell the police. Eventually, he was disfellowshipped because of an extramarital affair. BCG was warned not to mention her abuse to anyone, not even her boyfriend. Thankfully, she found the strength eventually to contact the police. In 3 trials and 6 years after that, her father was convicted and served 3 years in prison. She said the trials were easy compared to what she went through in the committee meetings with the elders. They have no rules about what they can say and how they treat victims. They have no training at all either. Always an all-male committee, and after everything that came out in the hearing, they still say that is something they will never change. She's had no contact from the elders, congregation or organisation since the conviction. She lists the fear of being shunned one of the factors that stopped her coming forward. So what happens if someone admits it, or they're found to have done it, but they repent? Any guesses? They may be reproved, which means someone will go up on the platform and say they've been reproved, no information. They are allowed to go back into the congregation, no warnings at all. They expect that person to monitor themselves. I don't have to tell you how dangerous all of that is. So, their lawyers have confirmed that there is a worldwide database of paedophiles that they know about, or at least people have had allegations against them. You see here, in the US they have been asked for these records. They are refusing to supply them. They're being fined every single day that they don't produce them. This is how much they're currently, this was like a couple of days ago, that's how much they're currently owed, and they still won't come forward with them. Now, two sources have indicated that there are over 23,000 names on this record. And if Lloyd Evans, I don't know whether you know him, he took the details of Australia, extrapolated it to, I think it was Australia, US, UK, and Canada. And it came out somewhere around there. And that is just allegations. That's not victims, by the way. And these are just people they've reported. And the only way we'll know for sure is if they release them. He's a member of the governing body. He's very comical, but try and listen to what he's saying.
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it's Jehovah's organization. We reject outright such lies.
Elders must call the legal department. Nobody seems to know what this is, by the way, if an allegation is made. And then in the letter, they refer back to the shepherding book, which is a book only elders are allowed to look at. It's now online, by the way, so that's good. And then it refers back to this book, which refers back to the two-witness rule. So they haven't made enough changes. They barely made any changes, let's put it that way. But in March next year, they are being investigated again by the Royal Commission to see what they've done. They're not going to be looking at individual cases. They're going to be looking at the procedure that they follow. So what does this mean for the wider community? If a paedophile moves into Jehovah's Witness preaching territory, the elders are notified by the police so they can mark the house as a do not call to protect themselves. However, if the Jehovah's Witnesses know of a paedophile in the congregation, not only do they not tell the congregation, they also fail to alert the wider community.
Jehovah's Witnesses in Watford area.
Yeah.
Are they very active? And secondly, where does the money come from?
Interesting. You should ask that. I don't know the numbers, but I mean, you know how active they are in Watford.
Yes, I do.
They're fairly.
Very active.
Yeah.
They've got 2 kingdom halls.
Yeah. So I'm not sure of the numbers, but the money, a lot of the money comes from voluntary contributions. They've just sent out a form to. This has been happening for a while apparently. It's anonymous, but you have to put in how much you can give, how much, if you can give them a loan, interest-free loans, in thing. Considering they're very much against war, they have investments in lots of, firms that make arms and stuff like that. but yeah, I mean, I think once the child abuse thing really hits, I mean, there's more cases coming out all the time. There's an investigation, a commission investigation in the UK that's going to be coming. I talked to one of the lead investigators. Again, child abuse, shunning, and the way they're managing their money, because obviously they are they're a charity. So
Are they
yeah.
a registered charity?
Yeah, religions are. So yeah.
Thank you.
Just out of interest, you mentioned universities forbidden. I mean, I was in it as a kid, left. I mean, I never got baptized.
Yeah.
But I went to university.
Yeah.
Is that a recent thing, the university?
It's when. Okay, so I left 20 years ago, and at that point it was discouraged and frowned upon. But in more recent times, there's a lot more in the magazines and publications to say that there's no point investing in this system, as they call it. And there was also a letter that went out to the elders about if an elder or a ministerial servant's children have gone to university, they wouldn't be right to be in a position of authority within the congregation. So there's big pressure to stop your children doing it. I'm sure some people fight it, but I mean it's really coming back to them now because they don't have. Nobody has any money because they don't have good jobs, and they don't have any expertise. If they had some good lawyers, I'm sure they've got one or two, but if they had people with expertise, they wouldn't probably be in half the problems they're in now.
How come they don't have good jobs? It's frowned on sort of.
Just because generally the level of education is quite low. I think that there was Pew Research, and they're in the. I think only 4%. This was in the US probably. Only 4% of witnesses earn over 100,000. They're like out of all the religions, they're the very bottom for earning. Yes.
Just out of interest, do you do the judicial committee? What is that like?
I've not been in one. I refuse to go to one. But basically, it'll be generally it's 3 elders. You will go and meet usually at the Kingdom Hall, where they will question you about what you've done, whether you're sorry, whether you're repentant. Then they will send you out of the room while they make a decision.
Did you just refuse to?
Yeah. Yeah, because I didn't see the point. What was the point of me going? I'm not going to sit there and have them tell me how bad I am when I don't care. I think a long time ago, I wrote a letter saying I know what I've done and I'm not sorry. So there's not much up for discussion in that.
Just thinking, how are you?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. At the given Kingdom Hall, how many elders would there be? Ish.
I don't know. Yeah, no, less than that. Probably, I would say probably about 6.
Oh, very
then you've
small,
got then you've got ministerial servants, which are kind of a bit step down, and then probably be, and that's the aim. If for a spiritual brother, that's the aim, to become a ministerial servant.
That committee sounds like a Sharia committee, doesn't it? In the Muslim faith, and of course a woman's testimony before a Sharia committee is only half the value of a man's testimony.
Yeah.
Is there equality within the JW?
No, not in the least. I don't know whether it would go that far, but all the committee, all the authority is all male. You can't to the point where I remember when meetings for field service would happen at somebody's house, and I remember my sister, if she had to say a prayer and there was a boy of a certain age there, she would have to cover her head to lead prayer, just to show she was submissive to them. So I don't think it's as extreme, but there's no equality there.
What's the rate of GW people leaving?
I don't know, to be honest, because I think it's very difficult to get those figures from them.
But now that with the internet, is there more people?
There's definitely more movement now, which I suspect is why they're closing down on their shunning and stuff like that. I mean, I'm in contact with, through the video I did, I'm in contact with 2 Jehovah's Witnesses now who are in, and they desperately want to leave, but they don't feel they can, because they feel like they will lose everything. And these people who've been baptised at adults, so you can imagine how much worse it is if you've been brought up in it. But there's a lot more, obviously with the internet, there's more activists, it's easier to research, a lot more apostates, and also there's, once you have left, there's more of a community also now. You know, Facebook groups and stuff like that. So, I mean, when I left, there was nothing, and so you leave and it's complete isolation. And I've had people say to me, like, how do you do it? How do you and it is complete isolation, and that's their weapon, basically. So I'm sure they'd love to close these communities down.
Did you feel tempted to join another church community so that you could share what? I mean, because there aren't a lot of things in our community that you can turn to.
You're right, because that's something religion does really well. It does community well. Now,
the Church of England's fairly sort of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people leave and they have a different faith. There's a lot of atheists. I mean, just because, for me, I researched it. For me, I mean, I was horrified by religion by the time I left, anyway. And I didn't think about it for a very long time, but
just
it was
it all.
Yeah, it was pretty much the last thing I wanted to get
No, I
involved
just
in.
wondered, this sense of isolation.
Yeah, no, I mean that.
Where'd you go? The pub or the church? You know,
Well,
it's kind
yeah,
of...
and I didn't feel. I mean,
well, there is now.
but even now, I wouldn't say I have a couple of friends, close friends now, but I wouldn't say I've ever really recovered from losing all that. And also, you have to bear in mind that losing everyone, losing your mother, losing all these people who are meant to love you, puts you off, and it's very difficult then to trust again. And that's another thing they do.
It's incredibly hard to understand it if you haven't been in that.
Yeah. So it's very difficult to make friends again. I mean, I've got groups of friends online. You know, my kids have got friends, and I talk to their parents, but it's difficult, and that's why you've got the online communities, because you've got this group of people that know. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to say to them, oh, because of this and that and the other, which is sometimes tiring. And you've just got some who, you know, people who instantly understand where you've come from.
Do you believe in a God of some sort, or have you just gone totally off it and you're an atheist now?
Honestly, for me, I don't. I don't think it's bad for people to believe in God, and you know, that's not my thing, really. I think people should be able to believe in what they want. For me, I don't feel there's enough evidence of one. Definitely not enough that it would impact how I live my life. And you know, as I said, I'm very into science and skepticism, and that's kind of where my focus is. And that's how I'm raising my children now, despite what happens at school. Because there's a lot of religion. Even they go to a non-faith school, but there's a lot of religion in school. So you can imagine. My daughter, she's 5. She came home and she was saying prayers at the table. What's happening? So yeah, but I mean, for me, my mission is not about God or atheism. Mine is about the harm that's being done. That's what needs to change. There is obviously the element of coercion and brainwashing, but I think if we can focus on the main harms first, that will sort a lot of the problems out.
Were you born into the church?
Yes.
So now you have ambitions to go to university.
Yes.
So you're starting out with, like, it's something I can't really reconcile, or empathize with, really, because you're starting out, presumably people are telling you that Jehovah does whatever the creation story is.
Yeah.
And so you believed that presumably for a while, did you?
Creation and the Bible.
Yeah.
I tell you something. I absolutely until probably 5 years ago, I was absolutely convinced of all of it.
Absolutely convinced.
Absolutely convinced. No question in my head.
Now you're talking about going to university
Yes.
and looking at reading. It's just an extraordinary change in somebody's mindset.
Yeah.
It's because you have to leave your entire support, your entire, not support system. You talked about that, but the pillars on which reason on which you exist is just being pulled on from under this fairy story and replaced with rational stuff. Where basically you have to kind of look out for yourself and by doing the right thing. But I just can't. 5 years ago, how your world would be so totally different. I can't.
You could say that.
When I was brought up Catholic, I always kind of knew, this is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well put. But in Ireland we kind of said, we'll go along because there's a lot of good stuff there as well because it's social and all the rest.
Yeah.
But
no, I understand that.
I can't get my head around that change 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, it started with I listened to a podcast. That's how it started. It was called Skeptoid. It's an American one, and it was talking about the Exodus. They were talking about why, with evidence and reason, did it really happen? And so that convinced it was like, okay, well this element, to me, this element is not true, and that then snowballs. Like, well, if this isn't true, then maybe other things aren't true, and that's when I started to investigate for myself.
So it's kind of slow deconstruction.
Yeah. It wasn't like, okay, that doesn't exist anymore, but it's gradual, and the more I got interested in skepticism and science, the better it was. And I had a network of actual evidence and reason to go to, as opposed to this is how it is. So, and I agree with you.
But
it is difficult to.
You're going from ignorance, total ignorance, regarding about how stuff works around you, and all of a sudden there's this explosion.
Yeah.
That's happening to you, and it's over. I only started 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I find that extraordinary.
Yeah.
Is it happening to you, or are you taking each step?
Yeah, more that than it happening. So, yeah.
Do you remember the thought you had when before you actually start going out with someone from the outside world? What happened? Do you remember the moment where I'm not going to that meeting, I'm not going? What happened in your brain? You see what I mean?
Bad thing.
Because that's for me, it's the fascinating part. Is that point where you change your mind?
Basically, I was always very in our congregation. You will have you got the elders, you got the elders' kids, the kind of the in group. I was never in that. My mum, I don't feel my mum was ever treated very well or very respectfully. So I was on the outside anyway. And then over time, I felt totally isolated from the congregation. And then I met this guy who showed interest in me for being me, basically. And he asked my number. I was like, okay. And then I, met up with him. And I remember just being like, what am I doing? I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to do it. And it happened quite quickly as well.
So it was more like an impulse.
Yes. Yeah. And as I was saying earlier, that it's that moment of desperation. I think when you get to that point, and literally, that was my way out. That was my exit, because when you're at home, you're with your with my parents. It's very difficult to just up and leave, but there was someone there saying, "Come with me," and so I did.
So do you think you would have left anyway? If you hadn't met him, would you have left anyway?
I think so.
Stayed longer?
But I probably would have stayed longer, but I would have met someone at some point, because I was gradually moving away from it. I was still towing the line. I still believed it, but I wasn't happy. And for the interim years, 15 years, I still believed it. But I didn't want to be there with these people. And I've said to people online, even if they're right, I don't want to be living forever with these people. It's awful. It's an awful organisation. It's not, everyone's so controlled, and most people are actually unhappy. So I'd rather live my life and exit rather than living forever.
Do you know whether Michael Jackson, I think he was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness family, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. I don't know much factual information about that. Anyone? No. But I think he got into a lot of trouble with Thriller, was it?
Yeah, that's why I got the disclaimer at the end of the video. That the video has nothing to do with he doesn't have proof of the occult.
We had to have that disclaimer at the end. Yeah, because that is.
But I think eventually he was either he left or he was kicked out or.
Yeah,
something.
I mean, they put up with a lot from people with money, but there are some things, like zombies. I mean, that's.
His mum's still in it.
Oh, really? Is she?
His mum's still in it.
Yeah, there's. I mean, it's weird. You can look online at celebrity Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, it's bizarre. And Prince was really bizarre because he converted later, and like you look at all the music he's made, but I think he stopped selling that music. I think he has stopped selling that music. But like, there's like murderers and stuff that are converted in prison. So my mum could have a murderer come to her house. That's fine, but not me.
Right, we're running out of time, so I think we'll just take one more question.
Thank you for your honesty tonight, and I can't imagine how hard it is to sell that. When you were leaving, did you notice anyone go through sort of a dissonance in themselves, like a jarring of how to cope with that? Because it sounds so cold, I suppose. Like, do you notice anyone wrestling with it?
You kind of don't, because you're cut off completely. Even I didn't see my family. I didn't see my sisters. I had one other friend who had left also. Kind of, well, not in a similar way, but she's now back. That's good. But not really, because you're completely cut off from it.
Okay, so I think, go on then, just a quick one.
Do they practice tithing?
Not officially.
Oh, practice what?
Tithing. Where they have to, but it kind of seems to be moving that way. They have they've obviously got the contribution everywhere. They even got they have like little, like the credit card machines. They have those at the conventions as well, so make it super easy. Super easy. But yeah, as I said, those forms about how much. I mean, that's getting close to it, I would say.
I was going to say what they've done is they finance the building of lots of kingdom halls, and each congregation would pay back to the society, almost like a mortgage. And what they did last year or 2 years ago was they cancelled all the debts, just waived them completely, but replaced it with a never-ending contribution of the same amount. So if the congregation was within 2 months of paying off its mortgage, it was then replaced with an unending contribution.
They're actually selling a lot of their buildings now.
They've sold the main one, haven't they?
So that doesn't sound.
The main.
Anything else?
Yes,
Okay.
they bought a new one, the chancellor. It's not in New York, is it? The new main building.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did read that they had to sell it because of financial pressures because of the lawsuit. So
It's just going to get, and that I actually believe that's how they're really going to get into trouble. I think it's going to be financial. They're already having problems, and they don't want people having any of the literature, like the actual Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't want them having like hard copies. They want it all to be electronic, which is also great because they can change whatever they want, and nobody can say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's not what you said." So, yeah.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Lydia.
Thank you for